4K Steelbook comes to the Dark Knight Trilogy, but I'm not sure fans are going to be huge on this set. Arriving just in time to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the kickoff to Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight Trilogy, which is, of course, Batman Begins, we finally have the combination, the merriment, if you will, of collective steelbooks with the 4K releases of the Dark Knight Trilogy. Up until this point, we've only gotten the 4K releases individually in their own separate jewel cases or solid cases, if you will, that often end up getting some sort of Black Friday deal year after year. And then, of course, we've gotten Blu-ray steelbooks for the standard Blu-rays that often just utilize the original poster art from the movies back when they initially got theatrically released with just a steelbook sort of treatment. We never got the combination of the two, at least here in the States. I know that officially we technically do have imported versions, or variants rather, that come with like little collectible inclusions and assets like trading cards and posters and all that jazz from places like in Asia and Europe that are region locked in some cases. Other times they're region free, but of course you have to import them, pay extra taxes, and then shipping costs, etc. And so now finally here, donning the label of being an Amazon exclusive, we have the Dark Knight Trilogy set in the form of what they're calling a library steelbook case, which is basically this style of kind of putting 3 or 4 steelbooks, depending on how many entries there are, and then putting them in this box that has kind of like the shelf sort of decor to the entirety of the design in the form of a steelbook box with a spongy padding in the middle to then hold everything in place. And so this is pretty much the exterior of that set. And kind of wrapped around it, you of course have the labeling for the brand of 4K Ultra HD with the stripe reading the Dark Knight Trilogy from director Christopher Nolan, the 3 films, and then of course the pinstripe there in reflective coating to symbolize that you're getting the 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray and question mark digital code, because I have a couple of comments to say about that. And this cardboard strip is then attached to yet another back insert over here that is pretty much your archetypal back artwork for any kind of set or 4K release, with of course imagery of the products right there, more labeling of the Dark Knight Trilogy, images of what's included inside, which we'll break down, still shots from the films, of course all your typical specs. Credits for the film are then on the bottom part of this insert that then gives us this flap that we can lift to then utilize as a form of method to remove said insert so that we can finally take a closer look at the box in and of itself. And overall, I truly do like the design and the approach to this, again, what they call the library casing, as far as what is holding our proper individualized steelbooks inside there with, again, the foam padding to keep them very firm and secure inside. But in regards to the approach of utilizing both matte and semi-glossy finishes to the airbrush design of the casing, I truly do like it. And I actually warmed up to the color scheming that they utilized here, as far as kind of going for this kind of copper and bronze sort of gold style to it. And I also like how you're pretty much breaking down the entirety of the trilogy as you wrap around the art design that's utilized here, which is of course the emblematic bat symbol that is overlapping the different styles catered to each film. So in the center you have a solid bat symbol for Batman Begins, one that's sort of eroding or being blasted away from The Dark Knight, and then the broken up one from The Dark Knight Rises. But of course each one utilizing different shades of, like I said, that copper, starting with black, a little bit of gray, and then that bronze copper design for the outwards parts that's kind of breaking apart. But if you look a little closer, you have faded imagery from each respective film taking up each side of the case that is not making up the axis to the steelbooks. So if we take a close look at the left wing over here, or at least this left panel, you'll notice that you have, of course, the wings, but then in the background, you'll sport some very faded imagery from Batman Begins. The same thing could be said about the center here, where you have the bulk of the symbols with the titles of the film, Dark Knight Trilogy, again, Christopher Nolan there in the center, but then wrapped around it, you'll see faded images, both from the posters, from the marketing material, and then still shots of the film from The Dark Knight. And then respectively, you're going to have the same thing going on over here, but this time for The Dark Knight Rises. Naturally, not much can be said about this side over here, except it's going to give us access to those steelbooks. In regards to what's waiting for us on top, it's simply just the same sort of color coordination and the same sort of airbrush finish, but then you'll notice that you have the Dark Knight Trilogy logo right there, and in the background you instead have a faded image or pattern of bats swirling around. And then not much can really be said about the bottom, except this time we go for a solid copper airbrush look there with, of course, copyrighted content and labeling from WB. So without further ado, let's talk about the individual steelbooks inside. I am gonna sort of breeze through some of the steelbooks for the films themselves because they did go for this very uniform look to each steelbook since they are part of a set. So if you cover one, you pretty much cover the entirety of them all. So let's start with, of course, the Batman Begins steelbook here. And this is probably the best one to sort of illustrate that since it is the first of the set. And you'll notice that they're going for this sort of style, this very minimalistic style of simply just having the bat symbol sort of wrap around the spine and having each of the wings on both the front and the back. So on the front, you have the right wing with Batman sort of in the center there via this sort of airbrushed copper design, of course, kind of favoring the marketing material behind Batman Begins, where they opted in for a much more orangey sort of style to all of the posters, the banners, the artwork, etc. Batman Begins and the Dark Knight Trilogy lettering down there at the bottom, a film by Christopher Nolan. And then when you rotate it towards the back, you have, of course, the other wing, an image of him carrying Rachel right there with bats flowing in the background, more little bits of lettering and credits for the films themselves down there at the bottom. And then in regards to the spine, you do at least have some branding there. You do have the name of the film right there because I know that sometimes steelbooks do fall into a form of trapping, whether they're regarding movie steelbooks or even video game steelbooks where sometimes the spine is just left empty. So it's cool to see that in the library style, they did still opted in for having the film name being branded there on the spine as well as logos for the film and the studios. And the only thing that I will remark on is that it is a little strange to see the head and the tail of the bat symbol being a little elongated from side to side to then cover the entirety of the spine. So if that sort of bugs you right there, yeah, that's going to be a little bit garish and very, very present when you kind of open up the steelbook and take a look. But then when you flex it, it does look a little better. It's still a little wider than I would have liked, but at least you have a very cool design right there of the overall symbol to then mask it just a little bit more proportionally. And since we're taking a look at the inside, it pretty much illustrates exactly why it is I'm going to be breezing through some of these movie steelbooks. Is because when it boils down to it, the actual discs inside are pretty much identical to that of the original 4K releases. So you're going to have a disc for the movie in 4K, one for it in Blu-ray, and then a third disc for the special features. So not much more that I can really comment on right there, except to just kind of sort of criticize ever so slightly the artwork that was utilized for the inside of the steelbook, which I think could have been done just a little bit better because here for the Batman Begins, for example, they utilized an image or rather a still shot from the movie when Batman is interrogating Jonathan Crane, aka Scarecrow, played by Cillian Murphy. I get it, it's from the movie, but I feel like there's so many better choices out there. I would have opted in for that iconic image of him gliding down from the top of that tower or that apartment building, whatever it was, when he triggers the bats to then circle around him and then he glides down. It's one of the more iconic images of the movie, and I think that that's probably could have been a better usage for that on the inside of the steelbook. But I digress. Then we have the Dark Knight Steelbook, which is of course utilizing the same exact pattern, only this time the bat symbol is in fact breaking apart and fading and being blasted in the form of a chaotic explosion. And of course, fittingly, you have the Joker forming in the side of the wing right there with the Dark Knight Trilogy, a little redundant there, but I think it is what it is. And as you can tell, they're utilizing a much more bluish aesthetic to the overall color scheming for the steelbook, but still utilizing that same semi-glossy matte finish for the overall airbrush design. And then of course more credits for the film, Batman utilizing the bat part there on this side, and then the similar case for the elongated body span of the middle part of the bat symbol there. But of course it's going to look a little bit better when opening up the steelbook right there. And as we take a closer peek inside, we get of course the same exact discs, only this time we have a different style of artwork for the inside part of the steelbook. Again, not the best choice, but still a very interesting one, and arguably one better than that of the Batman Begins one, because this time we do have Heath Ledger's iconic Joker looking over to the side here in front of the fiery pit of little pile of cash that he's burning so willingly. Except what I do find kind of interesting, and one little piece of trivia, is that I always wondered how this shot made it into so many trailers and yet it never showed up in the movie. I've seen the movie already a good like 5 or 6 times total. I think those are rookie numbers and I need to get them up. But I do distinctly remember this shot never making it into the final cut, so I wonder if it's a deleted scene or if it's an alternate take. And finally, we got The Dark Knight Rises, everybody's favorite out of the entire trilogy, right? Okay, I'm sorry, but The Dark Knight Rises is definitely a film that 13 years later, there's parts of it that has aged really, really well, which are definitely the highs of the movie, but the lows of the film have arguably aged worse. But I guess that's a bridge that we'll cross when we get to that retrospective video, at least at the 15-year anniversary in 2027. So I'll see you guys there. For now, though, here we have the Steelbook, which is, of course, utilizing the same template, only this time the bat symbol is definitely breaking similarly to the way that Bane did to the Batman. The Dark Knight Rises and the Dark Knight Trilogy lettering there at the bottom, Bane in the center of the right wing of the bat symbol. Dark Knight Rises there on the spine, as well as, of course, the much wider center portion of the bat symbol. On the other side, we have Batman from the promo art that was utilized when marketing the film, and then, of course, more of the credits. And this time, you'll note that it's going for a much more gray-scaled color scheming, fitting of the marketing material for that film. And then on the inside, the usual discs. And this time, we got artwork that is probably the best one to utilize for an insert of a steelbook, or at least the inside artwork, because it fits more so of the orientation from side to side. This time we got Batman on one side with the police, and then on the other side we got, of course, I'm not going to remove the discs right now because it's too much work, but on the other side you got Bane with his extended arms standing in front of course, the prisoners that are ready to overtake Gotham. So I feel like this is probably the most appropriate one out of the three, but I wouldn't necessarily blame you if you wanted to opt in for, say, the broken bat cowl from the posters that were so good, or of course any other variances that probably would have looked a little bit better for the inside part of the steelbook. But that's pretty much the three films, but that leaves us with a fourth and final steelbook included in here, and that's pretty much housing all of our, well, as the spine dictates there, all of our bonus material. I do appreciate that it's called bonus material as opposed to special features, because frankly there's nothing digital inside of this steelbook. Keep that in mind when we return the very, very poignant and very intentional usage of the terms nothing digital in that sentence. But as you can see, we have a fourth and final steelbook here that's called the Dark Knight Trilogy, with a very neat copper bronze sort of aesthetic or approach to the semi-glossy metal utilized here on the steelbook. I love the simplicity of the steelbook, as you can see right there with bats flowing around. It feels very holistic, again, very simple and minimal, yet really effective. On the side, bonus material, as I mentioned before. And then not much can really be found here at the back, except for, of course, some copyright stuff here towards the bottom. But you'll notice that, especially if you guys did manage to pick this thing up, that this is arguably the heftiest of the steelbooks. So hefty enough that it doesn't even fully close. When pulling it out of the box, you notice right there that one of the clamps is not fastened securely. And that's because on the inside, we have pretty much all of our physical goodies that are included inside of this steelbook set. First and foremost, we have our certificate of authenticity over here on the left, which is kind of brandishing this sort of construction paper that's got a little bit of heft. You even have a bit of a textured surface with some cool lining and lettering there for, of course, what's kind of labeled as number 5108 out of 16,680, which is, I guess you could put me in the top 33 or so % of the editions thus released, with a little bit of a passage there reading, celebrating the visionary filmmaking of Christopher Nolan and the iconic portrayal of Batman by Christian Bale. This limited edition collection features all three acclaimed films. Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Certificate of authenticity, and then, of course, all the other mumbo jumbo, complete with the bat logos there in the background. It's not necessarily egg-shelled colored, and it doesn't feature a watermark, so unfortunately, Patrick Bateman would not be impressed. But there you have the COA, as collectors like to call it these days. And I might be jumping the gun a bit here, but right behind the certificate is actually what could be considered my favorite inclusion in this entire set in regards to like the physical goodies, the knickknacks, the tchotchkes, if you will. I'm not going to have exactly enough space to show it off here in the wide angle talking head portion of the video, but I'll definitely cut to some B-roll here to showcase what is effectively a Jokerized edition of the Gotham Times newspaper clipping. And basically, it's a form of construction paper that you then fold out and then reveal to show different articles, but they've all been Jokerized from within the world of the Dark Knight. So naturally, it's going to have like blood stains, it's going to have retracted notes. You're going to have, of course, cutouts of other inserts in magazines, then glued on or taped on, so to speak, over imagery to then change up phrases and headlines in the form of jokes or Easter eggs or puns and play on words, etc., that, of course, are fitting of Joker's personality. And the reason for why this is my favorite one is because I literally spent more time scanning this thing up and down than any of the other physical inclusions inside of the set, because there's so many different little Easter eggs and play on words that are genuinely funny that you can tell that whoever put this thing together had a good amount of fun piecing it together and kind of put themselves in the mind state of the Joker to make sure that this thing it truly does feel like it came from him. At least that's what I'm hoping was the case. Of course, in this day and age, it's difficult to distinguish whether or not this was truly made by a human being or if it was, AI generated. I'm praying to God that it was the former, because there was generally an awful lot of good material being found within this newspaper clipping that even at the time of this recording, I have yet to breeze through the entirety of every single page and every single little paragraph, especially when it comes down to some of these like little Easter eggs and sort of ciphers that feature circled words and letters to then make up a sentence that I have yet to piece together. So if any of you happen to have picked up this set and are in the process of figuring out this puzzle, let me know in the comments if you guys have figured it out yet. Following that is yet another document that is sadly not as fun or as involved as that one, because on the outside here, it almost seemed like just a standard form of piece of paper, but when you unfold it, it is then revealed to be the blueprint schematic for the Bat from The Dark Knight Rises. And at first I thought that it was also another sort of meta in-world sort of document, so I was expecting there to be some kind of like notes or annotations by Lucius Fox and his team when developing the Bat in the R&D department of Wayne Enterprises and such. But it turns out that this is simply just a schematic that was actually drawn up by the filmmakers. You even have the name of the filmmakers here on the side of the document, where you have Christopher Nolan and what was his name? Nathan Crowley, the art director, the production designer, here on the side, along with a couple of other names from the team over there in the filmmaker's side. So I was kind of hoping that they would extrapolate and have a little bit more fun with this one all around, but it's still not a bad little inclusion there to kind of take a gander at. But it's once you get to this award ceremony looking envelope over on the right that then things get a little puzzling, because as you can see right here, it's a cardboard construction paper sort of envelope that reads The Dark Knight Trilogy on one side with a full frame right around it. And then over on the other side, again, kind of favoring that aesthetic of something out of an award ceremony with the winner encompassed inside, is the bat symbol yet again, with the different versions, with one solid, one exploding, and then one breaking, only this time with a very reflective gold trim almost all around it right there that's reflecting in the light. So it's pretty nice and pretty premium feeling. And then housed inside are different little knickknacks and documentations that, again, are a little strange, because at first I was actually pretty infatuated with these storyboard cards, which are these like little postcard styled of documents right here, with one side featuring super high-res imagery from the films. You have a grand total of 6, 2 per film. And as you can see right there, you have images from the sequence there in Batman Begins where he finally gets the upper hand on Ducard, aka Ra's al Ghul. And then a little bit of an exterior shot from Nepal right there. The Batpod chase sequence from The Dark Knight. And then, of course, the opening sequence from The Dark Knight Rises. And I truly do appreciate how vibrant and high-res these images look like. But I appreciate even further, as, like I said, a big film aficionado and someone who's aspiring to want to be a filmmaker, to be having the storyboards for those sequences, those corresponding sequences, on the back of the card. So you can see right here that you have illustrations to sort of previs and sort of step-by-step break down the sequences that are going to be featured in each respective film, along with some notes right there on the side, complete with camera movements, placements, etc., and even some date stamps right there. As you can see, the Batman Begins one reads January 2004. So even before they even started filming, it's kind of interesting to see how much of these throw back. And even furthermore, if you take a look at some of the Batpod ones and Dark Knight Rises ones, you'll note something that I also found kind of interesting, is that the Batman Begins ones are sketched out in the traditional 240:1 aspect ratio, but then when you get to the Dark Knight Rises and Dark Knight sequences, they are sort of stenciled and illustrated to fit the IMAX framing. So you can see right there that you have the much more open matted IMAX framing with a couple of guidelines for where the 240:1 aspect ratio is going to cut off the imagery. So I do find that that's rather neat and pretty indicative of how far ahead in advance Nolan would prep some of these images and visuals for when it came to shooting. Which is why I then find so bewildering what comes next, or lack thereof, I should say, because then you get these lenticular cards. Only two. I thought that there would be more. And they're both sort of favoring Batman Begins more than anything else, which I guess from a certain perspective, a certain point of view, I would totally understand, considering it's the 20-year anniversary of that specific movie. Except the lenticular cards are not that great, because you'll note right there that there's really nothing on the back. And on the front, you have, of course, the very lenticular design to then have these two styles of art. One has the sort of a cyclone of bats that then sort of encompasses the profile, the side profile of both Bruce Wayne and Batman, as it kind of fades in between ever so slightly between movements. But you can see right there, my initial problem with these things is that they don't really transform all the way through, regardless of which direction you move them in, up and down, side to side. They're not terribly strong, and they got this like makeshift fan-made Photoshop style to them that I just think are a little bit egregious. And then when it comes down to this one, for example, you got like these two cathedral-looking pillars, and in the bottom center there is Bruce Wayne as a child. And as you can slightly move the lenticular design, you'll note that Batman sort of fades in and out of the clouds there towards the top. And the Gotham City skyline, so to speak, is sort of fading a little bit towards the background right there, but then it kind of fades out back into the Wayne Manor slightly, ever so slightly, and some bats sort of fade in and out slightly. Again, these are not necessarily strongly made. I don't know what it is about them, but I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. I feel like I've seen some better lenticular designs in goddamn flea markets at this point. So I don't know. These are super perplexing. I was expecting slightly better to come in a licensed product such as this, specifically out of WB, and most definitely out of the company, whoever the company is that makes these Steelbooks sets. And it gets even worse as we then take a close look at what I thought were legitimately bookmarks, because look at this. I thought they were bookmarkers, and according to the description, these are meant to be billboard art cards, but I, for the life of me, don't understand why they're included, because when it boils down to it, it's simply just a bunch of landmark cities around the world that are decked out in that orange hue from Batman Begins and have a bunch of bats flying in the sky. And that's it, you know, and it's a bunch of cities that are not privy to the Dark Knight trilogy. So you have London, you have Paris, I think you have Chicago or Sydney, Australia. I can't really make out a couple of them. They're a little bit lost on me. But of course, you have the much more very iconic ones. Like I said, I want to say that's Dubai. I could be wrong. That's not Dubai. That's not it. But that one's definitely London, because we do got Big Ben right there. But again, at the end of the day, I'm like, why are these here? I do appreciate the reflective pattern to the style of the surface right there, but again, nothing on the back, just completely black with copyright and not much else. If anything, like I said, they serve a better purpose as being bookmarks for something, for maybe reading your Batman comics, but otherwise, that's really about it. So I was thinking to myself, okay, well, I guess that really about does it for the included collective stuff specific to this release. At least, let me take out the digital code voucher so that At least we can, I can kind of document that in the video. Yeah, about that. You may have noticed up until this point that there have been no vouchers for the digital codes of each respective film. They weren't included in any of the steelbooks for the films, and they're most definitely not in this bonus material steelbook, let alone this envelope here that would have been a perfect spot to have included it in. And trust me, I checked the inside part of that cardboard strip that I just removed with the back art. I was thinking that maybe they stamped it on the inside as like a nice little hidden Easter egg that, like, oh, there's their digital code. And then I thought that maybe it's included here on the side, inside of the actual library casing. But I legit cannot find the voucher for the digital downloads of the films anywhere. So I'm going to get in touch with Amazon. The only other scenario I can think of is that maybe they are included on the Blu-ray or on the 4K. You pull up the menu and maybe there's like a QR code that you scan with your phone to then give you access to the Movies Anywhere digital code. But as far as I can tell, that's never been the case with any of these steelbook sets, regardless of whether they're from WB with the Dark Knight Trilogy here or other movies from other companies. They've always been physical vouchers that have the literal code stamped on there. And that was the same case for the initial 4K release of the Dark Knight Trilogy in standard cases. They were actual physical papers inside of the cases with the codes on them. So I don't know exactly what it is that transpired here. It could be a manufacturing defect, and if it is, I'm most definitely going to have to get in touch with Amazon to see what could be done about that, because I do think that that's a bit of a jip, especially, and I understand that I'm not necessarily suffering all too greatly here, since this would probably have been like my third or fourth code of the Dark Knight Trilogy for me personally, and I've already technically have the movies added to my Movies Anywhere library. But say, for example, someone was biding their time to collect this set to finally have all three of the Dark Knight Trilogy films on Steelbook and have the digital code be included there, and they were reserving their time for those codes, only to then receive their set and not have them with them. It's kind of bullshit. And that is why for a set sitting at $130 right now on Amazon, I would argue that as much as I was ecstatic to finally have what is one of my favorite trilogies of all time, despite the flaws of the third and final release inside of that trilogy, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight mean so much to me that I was willing to double dip on getting not just another 4K release, but also get them in the form of a steelbook, because I'm a bigger steelbook fan than I am a fan of like physical inclusions with these kinds of sets, as far as like storyboards and like fake, pieces of paper. Though I was genuinely surprised by the newspaper clipping. It kind of reminded me an awful lot of like the viral marketing for the Dark Knight movie back in 2008. Probably one of the few, if not the only, Christopher Nolan movie to really have some sort of viral campaign for it. But I would be straight up lying if I didn't say that that was genuinely the peak of those physical inclusions. After that, it quite literally went downhill from there in regards to, like I said, the glorified bookmarks. The postcards that did feature the storyboard stuff on the back were neat, but there was definitely something else that could have been included. And then to realize just before finalizing this review that there was no digital voucher found anywhere, I was like, am I crazy? Did I overlook something? And as of right now, there's still no respective answer to that, and I do think that that's a major crux to this entire set that makes me argue that this is definitively a 7 out of 10. It could have been a much bigger staple for any Dark Knight Trilogy fan to pick up, but right now I would argue that for the amount of money that you're spending, you're probably better off trying to look at some of these exporting sites that can sort of import you, even with the shipping costs and potential tariffs, a 4K steelbook release from overseas, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Asia, that will probably give you your better bang for your buck, especially if you're dealing with a potential loss of the digital code and underwhelming inclusions from those bookmarks and all that jazz. But if you're still thinking about picking this set up, I am nevertheless going to include the affiliate link down in the description, since it does take you directly to Amazon, and there is a bit of a form of a kickback. But again, don't feel obligated to pick it up, because even I felt like there were still some missed opportunities, some major flaws with the set that could have been better better exploited by WB, especially to commemorate the 20th anniversary of one of the films inside of the damn trilogy, Batman Begins. And there could be better options out there to celebrate that 20th anniversary. And if any of you can think of them, let me know down in the comment section below. And while you guys are down there, hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this review / unboxing / overview of the Steelbook set. Thumbs down if you did not. And as always, take care, guys, and stay humble. Peace out.